Can you guys hear me? All right, great. Thank you guys so much for coming on a Friday night. I'm sure you've all had really busy weeks. It's such an honor to be here to talk with you. I've had a privilege of having dinner with some of you guys last night and then talking some more today. I'm really excited about the panel after this. And it's really fun to meet people here in Dublin and talk about design because it's my favorite topic. I feel like such a nerd, but I can't escape that conversation. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about one of my favorite topics, which is the ROI of UX. And I actually created this talk a few years ago. I'll forward to this screen. I started teaching at a place called General Assembly. Have you guys heard of GA at all? So, and as my students are graduating out of the UX program, I realized that companies didn't really know what a UX designer does, and they didn't even know why it was important to hire one. So I created this talk to help explain why. And a little bit about me, I started programming when I was 8. I had a TRS-80 that I saved up $80 for. Do you guys know what a TRS-80 is? Yeah. So who's in the room tonight? Who works in design? Cool. Who works on the development side of things? How about entrepreneurs? Excellent. So I see a crossover there between that, which is fantastic. So anyway, yeah, started programming when I was 8. I'm on the advisory board at Santa Monica College, which is a local college in Los Angeles. Taught at GA for 2.5 years. I helped create their curriculum for the program. So the immersive course is a 9 to 5, 5 days a week, 10-week program to help people that want to learn how to become UX designers enter the field as junior designers. I'm not sure how I got it, but I was was recognized as 50 LA tech CEOs and founders, executive, and hackers you must follow on Twitter. So that was pretty cool. I'll keep it. So my history, gosh, starting back when I was 8, of course, when I first started programming, but then also as an adult, I was a yoga instructor. That was my first business. And in that business, I was doing my own websites and branding collaterals and things like that. Fast forward a bit, I became a mom, and I started another business, which was a baby carrier and a pet carrier. And so I did wholesale, retail, manufacturing, and things like that. And it was when I did that career that I realized that I didn't really like having the business as much as I liked building all the websites that go with it and all the print materials and all the things. So that's when I moved into a career of visual design. It was actually called graphic design and web design at that time. And now I specialize in user experience design. So I'm trying a joke here. I don't know if it works culturally as well, but I think it might. And I love it because it is really hot right now. You know, people are like, what is UX? Hansel. That Hansel's so hot right now. But it's true, and people are talking about it, and people like, yeah, that's UX, and they're talking about it, and they still don't really know what it is. And I'm like, that's not really UX. So I do a lot of education about what is UX and what does a UX designer do. I have a quote from Don Norman, who is one of the leading figures in user experience design. He defines user experience design as user experience encompasses all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. And a lot of times we think about UX design being purely digital, but it can, of course, expand beyond that. Kind of like Dogpatch. Coming in, you get greeted at the door, and you see this culture and things like that. I don't know, is there an app for Dogpatch as well, renting the rooms for conferences and things? Yeah? No, they don't have that, never mind. But anyway, so there's this whole experience though, and that's really that's more of a physical experience and less of a digital experience. Today, the talk is going to focus mostly on digital because that's my specialty. In 1943, Colossus was built and used. You guys know, without reading the slide, do you know what it was used for? Yeah. So it was one of the very first programmable computing devices that was used. And so the reason I have this in here is that there was always this trend whenever I started working on products. Someone would have an idea and they would hire a developer to see if it could be done. And nowadays with UX, people are hopefully, and this is what I would like to encourage anyone else to do, if you're going to do a product, hire a UX designer first. Developers nowadays will say, yeah, I can build it. Of course. My fiance is a front-end developer. I say, can it be done? Yeah, of course it can be done. But the question is, should it be built? Are we solving a problem? Are we solving a need? So anyway, it started here, and I think that's why that happened, because there were very few people interfacing with computers and technology. And the reason UX is important is because as things started to progress with technology, in the 80s, this was my computer. I would learn basic DOS, and I would make the little robot dance on the screen. It was really fun. And then now, I pulled this slide from Luke Robowski. He talks about the pervasiveness of mobile devices. And if you look here at the numbers, 30 million PCs, and it's kind of leveled out. But look at mobile. And if you think about the Internet of Things and how pervasive technology is, another one of my favorite speakers is Golden Krishna. He talks about just put an interface on it. Does it really need an interface? And so UX designers are important because more and more people are interfacing with technology. A year or so ago, IBM announced that they're going to spend $100 million on hiring UX designers, which is kind of a big deal for such a big company. And the CEO, or the person in charge of interactive experience, said, the world is sort of waking up to design thinking. We've seen this in all of our research. CEOs are very focused around the customer experience. This is where we're seeing demand. And it's true. Do you guys have Chase Bank here? JP Morgan? Yeah. Yeah. So in the United States, they started doing this marketing program called the Master Series. And in there, they started selling something. It wasn't lower bank fees. It wasn't free checking or anything like that. They started selling experience. And in this picture it took Joel Silverman years to become a master dog trainer, but only a few commands to master depositing checks at Chase. So selling ease of use. And another one, this was of Serena Williams, technology designed for you so you can easily master the way you bank. And on this one, it took Serena Williams 14 years to master the art of tennis, but only one try to master the Chase mobile app. And in the commercial, it shows her using her phone, and she's got a tennis ball, and she whacks it with her tennis ball, and it's that easy. You don't even need fingers to use the app from Chase. You just need a tennis ball because it's that simple. And so in this presentation, actually, I have a link to the commercial, and I'm going to share the presentation with you guys so that you guys all have a link to it. But I think it's clever. It's a sign that big businesses are now using their marketing dollars to promote user experience design. And I have this thought. I have this correlation. In the United States, there's this huge need for developers, but we're only putting out so many. But in correlation with the amount of developers that we need, I think we need at least one UX designer for every 5 developers. That's my take on it. And so, again, with the pervasiveness of technology, we need more designers. So what is the ROI of UX? That's really why you guys are here. And we'll go through my top 3 reasons that I found. And typically, as a designer, if I am going to proselytize or champion user experience design, I'm going to be talking to people that they don't really want to know what a UX designer does. They want to know how it's going to help improve their business, help improve the bottom line. And so one of the first reasons, save time and money. If you hire a UX designer, you're going to reduce the amount of time that it takes to actually design a useful and necessary product. And we'll go into deeper, just a little bit deeper. Improve your KPIs, your key performance indicators, and increase your revenue. This is the big one that people that pay the bills and say, yes, you can hire a UX designer. This is one of the big ones. Some examples here are with startups. The number one reason that startups fail is that there's no need in the marketplace. And we were talking about this just before the talk. We were talking about how businesses and entrepreneurs especially, they may have what they think is the greatest idea ever, but they haven't done the market research to find out if people will actually use or adopt the thing that they want to build. And a lot of times I get approached by entrepreneurs and they'll say, I've got the best idea ever. All my friends told me it was a great idea. And I need to build this thing tomorrow. And I'm going to get bought by Facebook or Google. And typically, they haven't done the research. They don't even know if the market's saturated. They don't even know if they're solving a need. So a UX designer can help early on by conducting surveys, interviews, user testing to see if the value proposition is on point. Because really, that's what we were talking about as well, is like, will people adopt the thing that you're promising to build and it's going to solve the problem that you're promising? We can also do demographic research. Can people actually afford the product? Because it's great if you want to build the thing, but can people actually pay for it? And who's your target audience? And does the product actually solve a need? And who does it solve a need for? I found this and I'm like, oh my gosh, did anybody test this? You know, did it go straight into production? I don't know. I mean, I think I might like the whole piece by itself, even without the Velcro for all my remotes. But anyway, you know, this is one of those things. It's like, is it really useful and does it solve a need? Here's another one. If you ask a developer, I need, or a contractor, I need 2 toilets. Perfect, here's 2 toilets. You got your 2 toilets. But if you test it, or if you were to ask people or prototype it first, you might realize that what you've built isn't actually useful. So I'm using this absurd example, but it really gets the point across, right? Is that actually useful? No, I don't think so. I mean, it could be in a contest of some sort, but I don't think it's going to be useful in most cases. And here's the other one. Having worked with many developers, close friends, I've seen so many developers spend so much of their time on avoidable rework and be really upset that the time they've spent building something which they already knew didn't make sense, but they built it anyway, and then they have to go back and fix it. So not only is it costing the company money, but it's costing morale as well. The amount of times that developers spend on rework, avoidable rework, is 50%. And that gets to be expensive. I pull this example about Obamacare, their website. This was in 2013. It had already topped $600 million in cost. And it didn't work even then. And even 2014, it still wasn't great, or 2015. And I can't help but wonder, did they do the testing? This would be one of those unique products that it's built for everyone. But I think I could have built it for a lot less and would have been a lot more successful. So again, if the cost of fixing an error after development is 100 times more than fixing the error before the project is completed, so if you've done the research, you've done the testing, you've done the prototyping, ideally you could avoid this type of exorbitant cost. And I use a big number because it's more shocking. But recently, my host posted an article, Dave, on Fluid UI. And this is the cost of fixing issues at different stages in the software lifecycle. So this is from the Fluid UI blog, and it talks about if you do it at the requirement stage, it's 1 times. At the development stage, it's 6.5 times. At testing, it's 15 times, and in maintenance, it's 100 times. So a lot of these things could be caught before they ever make it to development. Designers are usually less expensive than developers. And a lot of people say, we don't have time to prototype, we don't have time to test, we don't have time for those things, and yet you're eating that time up anyway, and it's costing you a lot more in the long run. So, and it's hard because a lot of companies are stuck in old habit patterns of the way that they've done things for all these years. And so it's up to us to try to change that habit pattern and that workflow and say, no, let's take the time to test, let's take the time to prototype so that we can save the company money. Dr. Susan Weinschenk, she did a white paper on the math, if you actually want to figure out in your company what money you could save. There's a formula here, but it's very impressive. And again, when you guys, I'm going to share this whole presentation with you, there's a link you can follow. You can go deeper into that. But it really, sometimes you need those concrete numbers to be able to prove how much money you could save. Now, unfortunately, in a startup, if they haven't built anything yet, they're not going to know what they could save. But if you're working in a company that already has an established workflow, you can get these numbers. You can pull these numbers up and say, look, this is why we need a UX designer. This is why we need the process. So on to improving KPIs. So key performance indicators can be different from company to company, but typically conversions. We all want people to convert. We want them to sign up, log in, download, whatever that is. And UX designers, knowing by doing testing and contextual inquiry, talking to people as they're using products, especially even prototypes before it's built, you know where those conversion points are. You know what the value statements need to be to get them to click on these different buttons. And these are all lead generation examples here, but they still count as conversions. Registrations. You guys ever use Hipmunk? Have you seen it? I love it. It's a really clever site because you can sort your travel plans by agony. That's the first default choice. So it's by flight time, layover, Wi-Fi, comfort of the plane, et cetera, et cetera. But this is really cool. Registrations, you know, that's another sign of success. And they have placed this sign-up piece on their website. So you type in where you want to go. And as you are waiting, it says, hey, we'll give you an alert for this when it's ready. It's a useful thing for me to do. I want to know when there's lower fares. I want to know all these other pieces. And they've got me at that point. I've signed up for their email newsletter, and it wasn't what we call dark UX. They didn't get it from me some other way where the checkbox was there and I didn't see it. Something else that's really cool about what they do here, computing's become really fast, but they slow it down on purpose. They did some tests. They found out that if they give you the flight results too quickly, you don't trust it. You don't think it was very thorough. So they made it wait. And while you're waiting, they're getting your email address. So it's very clever. Another KPI that I've worked with before, so one of the companies I worked with was Dex Knows, and it was basically a 100-year-old legacy phone book company. And when I came in, they had basically been doing design by the engineering team. They had just built feature on top of feature on top of feature, and it was very confusing for users. So I was able to come in and understanding all of our key paid actions, just change the information architecture a little bit, and really get to a place where we could improve the paid action rate, because that's how we made money. We made money if people clicked on the website of the client, if they looked at photos, if they got directions, if they made a phone call. So just by making those things more apparent, we were able to increase our revenue. This is a fun one. Fewer abandonments, lower bounce rate. I'm pretty tech savvy. We have two 3D printers at my house. We have the HTC Vive. We have lots of games. My fiance has like 7 phones. I don't know, but it's really abundant. And one time I was signing up for Cover California, another part of the healthcare system reform in the United States, and it took me 45 minutes to create my password. And I feel really bad for the little old lady who lives in the Midwest who's on dial-up at the public library, because there's no way she would have made it through. There's no way that she would have been able to get on. And you know that by doing contextual inquiry, by sitting with people, going through the process, and seeing what happens. It never told me what my password should be. It never told me I needed a special character. It didn't tell me I needed a number. And the crazy thing was, is in 6 months, it was going to change it again. I have to redo the same process again. I think that's a fallacy. Again, talk to developers. I don't think it has to be that stringent. So I think you can really improve sign-up and conversions that way. Decrease calls to help desk. That's a big one, because if that sign-up form had worked, I wouldn't need to call in for a help desk, right? And just making those minor improvements, you won't need as much customer service help. And in fact, customer service teams are some of the best in understanding what to change in your products, because they hear all the complaints and they know the frequency of those complaints, and they're the first line of defending the brand, really. So not to take lightly customer service, but it gets expensive, and ideally people, you shouldn't need that much care. Increase engagement. So Virgin America in the States, they have these clever, they went through a redesign recently, and they went through this clever little icons. And I love it because I spent so much time on their site. Now, I don't think that time of engagement on their site is an important metric, but I use it as an example because if you have really good content and it has humanistic language that makes me laugh. So what it says here, it says, pick your Virgin America .com alter ego. Your avatar will represent you during your experiences on the site. It can't, however, represent you in court. So simple, but it was clever enough that I'm like, I have to check out all the things that this site does. And last but not least, increase revenue. Have you guys heard of the $300 million button? I know you have. So I love telling the story. It's not my story, it's someone else's story, but I think it's really relevant, and it really, again, leaves a big impact on why UX is important. So a famous UX designer, Jared Spool, was working with a client. They wanted him to kind of assess their system and see how they could make improvements. And it really has a lot to do with shopping cart abandonment, and he tells the story way better than I do. But the gist of the story is he sat down with users and he found out that people were not finishing the checkout process because they couldn't remember their password or their login. And it was a barrier to entry into the site. Nowadays, if I am forced to log in or sign up for a service before I can even start shopping, I'm out. I'm going to go someplace else where it's easier. So by adding the Checkout as Guest button for this company, they were able to increase revenue in that year by $300 million. It's a really big deal from one button. Now, it cost them a lot of money to change the system to fix this. It cost them a lot of money to find the metrics of where people were actually dropping off, improving it. But by sitting down with people, giving them a prepaid card to go and shop on the site, they were able to find out what the solution was. So it was really simple, clever. Took them a little bit of time, but it was well worth it. That's the big one that seems to resonate most with people that are, again, trying to decide if they should really hire a UX designer or not. And that's it for there. I also, when I share this presentation with you, I have some other resources for you that I'll share. Another talk that I did for usertesting.com on the same topic, some books that I recommend, some trusted sources, a cool UX checklist, and more proof of why UX is important, more ammunition for you, and some really useful links. But what I'd like to do is kind of open it up to you guys and just, see, have you encountered some of these things? Some of you guys raised your hand as designers. How many of you guys work with UX designers? Just a couple. How many of you guys are UX designers? Got it. So what's it been like for you as a UX designer championing what you do? Is it easy? No. What's hard about it? No pressure. If your boss is here, no pressure.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So we frequently organize testing sessions. We get great feedback. We do pretty extensive potential inquiry using, I think, pretty standard techniques. Bring back some. What's the best way to get business to buy in some of the most valuable findings, rather than picking and choosing in a committee format? Not saying that's what we do at our company, but I've seen that happen in various situations where we don't really leverage everything we've learned.
Yeah. And so it's hard to get buy-in from people to actually implement the findings that you have.
Yeah, especially for the legacy projects.
Yeah. It's a really good point. Anybody else that works as a UX designer, what are the other challenges have you guys come across? Similar things, yes?
Yeah, I have I'm 50% UX designer. I'm a conversion rate optimizer, so I do this stuff exactly.
Yeah.
So the problem is that people usually want that the website looks like piece of art, but it doesn't sell.
Yeah.
So then it's kind of, that's a pain point.
Yeah, because they want this to look really pretty.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
But it's not about how it functions.
Yeah,
which is really
starting from the front page, they want to moving video, background, and stuff, and so. Yeah.
Interesting, yeah, because there's always that highest paid person in the room that has a really strong opinion about how it should be, and how do you get them to really do what works versus what they think it should look like, right? Yeah, that's a hard one. Anybody else have some challenges? Yes?
Just spending time in the beginning doing things like contextual inquiry. Like your point was really good earlier about you're going to spend the time anyway. But how do you prove that? Especially when you're in-house, So I'm making the transition now from in-house to out-house, and it's just something I want to be able to make very clear from my portfolio that what I can bring.
Yeah.
So.
There's a book in this list called Undercover UX. So even if there's no time or budget to do the things that you want to do, he talks about how to do it guerrilla style. So even if there's no budget or time, really doing what you need to do. It's hard because everybody's on the timeline. And I think that was something else that I was talking with the panelists about, getting sales teams on board with what they promise in the beginning to what can actually be done. Because I feel like that's one of the biggest reasons that things get pushed out for UX, is that there's not enough time from when they promise something to be delivered. Is that part of why that's happening for you? Yeah. It's kind of classic. And I think it's over time, and I think it's through metrics. So if the metrics don't exist in your system, kind of like Dave, you were talking about earlier, those the companies and the report that came back about, if they have this design thinking, how much better they're more successful they are, right? So I think it's asking your the analytics team or whoever's in charge of tracking that, say, hey, look, maybe it's measuring it in that regard. It's one of those hard things too, because you don't want to be like, I told you so in your job, because then you become like this nitpicker of like, I told you so. But it is really hard to do all of that in the beginning, especially if you're a team of one. How many work on your team?
Oh, there were a few.
Oh, there are a few, yeah. So like dividing and conquering and doing that contextual inquiry in the beginning. Research takes a long time. So it's really interesting to think about, as we do move from an older legacy way of thinking into an agile system, in my opinion, and I'm sure we can talk more about this later, but to me, UX is a little bit waterfall, and it should live 2 to 6 weeks ahead of development sprints so that there is time to do that. So really just kind of championing that, saying that over and over again, and kind of, encouraging code freezes so that you guys can catch up to the new features that you're working on. Anybody else? Yes.
Yeah, we work on like kind of web brand redesign. So like if a brand wants to relaunch their website, we generally work with a UX designer, a web designer, and a graphic designer. But I find like the UX designer is the most difficult to communicate with in terms of kind of what language to use. Like I know a graphic designer make the website look great, web developer do all the back end, but a UX designer is often the most difficult, I think, to kind of communicate what the brand wants in almost.
That's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, who doesn't exactly know maybe everything that they know, if you get me.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the UX designer is having a hard time conveying that, or they're the hardest to work with?
Yeah, well, like I know if the graphic designer, I'm like, yeah, like make this look like this.
Right, but how do you tell that? How do you communicate to a UX designer the goals of the company and what they should be focusing on?
Yeah, I suppose kind of we communicate like what their targets are, what their objectives are, but I suppose it's the language maybe that we're using.
We're missing the steps between.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the thing, because
Yeah.
we don't understand what they understand, I suppose, from the UX design point of view.
Yeah, what I've been seeing is inviting UX designers to do internal workshops with teams and educating them about their process and what they do. And then even bringing in, if possible, again, everybody gets really busy, they have their daily tasks that they have to do, but creating more collaborative moments with the UX team or the UX designer and letting people have a say, kind of, we call it design studio, where everybody gets to sketch some ideas and kind of then you can go and then the UX designer can go and test those. So I would recommend, if there's time, even if it's a 30-minute lunch talk or something like that, that might help a bit.
Great.
Yeah, that's good. Any other questions or pain points that you guys have? Yes. No, it's all right.
Because you brought something up there that influencing KPIs, like I would believe that that's the natural evolution of a UX designer. But it's been very difficult to have that conversation because I think where you're put in an organization as a UX designer, it's not always amenable to having that conversation about KPIs. Like maybe they're already well decided ahead of time. And so it's kind of, you try to have that conversation and people are like, who are you and why are you talking to me about this? So it's just an interesting challenge.
Yeah. I think, again, as a UX designer, having the proper metrics in place so that you can prove that your design did move the needle for those KPIs.
Yes, like even having the conversation about what is the needle.
Ah, got it. So having benchmarks set.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
really, in my experience, I'm 10 years as a UX designer in 3 or 4 big companies, and that I was never party to that conversation. So,
Yeah.
or they didn't have a conversation at all.
Yeah.
So when you're saying, what is it you're hoping to improve here? It's like, we're redesigning it, You're
Yeah.
like, but why?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I see
anyway.
that a lot. You guys use Waze here at all? Yeah. So Waze a while back did a redesign. They didn't change the functionality of the system. They just made it look prettier. But it's almost like, and I'll see certain things, and my colleague Murphy and I, we joke about this. It's like they must have had money to spend, but they didn't know what to spend it on or what to improve. So for me, what's really frustrating as well is I need to know company benchmarks. I need to know their goals, and I need to know what those are and when they want to hit them. Because if I'm not a part of that conversation, then I can't help. And that's really what we want to do as designers. We really want to improve things and give value to the work that we're doing. So yeah, that would be very frustrating. I do find that depending on how large the company is, though, that UX designers, it's important to have the soft skills of communication. And if you are working with a UX designer that's not good at communication, that's a problem. But talking to everybody, making friends with the IT guy and the salesperson and the marketing person and the content person, and having those conversations, because a lot of times in the older companies, Dave and I were talking about this earlier, they're very siloed. And if you're not a part of that conversation, how can you effectuate change? So it is really important. And a lot of times we're the ones that instigate that. Because not only do we want to fix things that work, we also want to fix systems internally that are broken. So we can't help it. As a UX, it's kind of a curse. Like, you can't stop now. Like, if a queue is really crazy, you have a better way to fix the queue at the airport. Or if, like, I don't know, if something's not right in the car, like, they should have moved this here. We're constantly fixing and improving things. So, well, do we have more time, or are we going to break?
I've lost track.
You guys, thank you so much for your questions and for being so participatory.